going to go ahead and switch over to that.
Great. And while you're doing that, Kevin, I'll just introduce myself and you and go over the quick housekeeping tips. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar today. My name is Sarah Levin. I am the Director of Grassroots and Community Programs at the Secular Coalition for America. I am very pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Kevin Bowling, the Executive Director of the Secular Student Alliance. And he will be presenting how to recruit and retain young people in your local group. The Secular Coalition for America uh, took over management of the United Coalition of Reason in February, and we did a 120-day needs assessment of local secular communities. And one theme that came up time and time again from local secular communities across the country was that they are struggling to get young people to join their groups. And when they do have young people, everyone join their groups, they have trouble keeping them there and keeping them coming. And so they're very interested. A lot of folks are interested in figuring out ways to change this and get more young people involved, obviously, so that our groups and our community and movement can be more sustainable in the long term. And so I know I'm really looking forward to hearing what Kevin has to say and learning from him today. So before I turn it over to him, just some quick housekeeping. For those of you who are logged into their computers for the webinar, you should see a chat box. It should be in the bottom lower half of your screen. You can type questions there. I'm going to be monitoring those questions, and at the end of the presentation, we will have time for Q&A where we can have your questions answered. If you are on the phone, unfortunately, the webinar platform doesn't have a great way to ask questions, during the presentation. But if you'd like to email me a question at sarah@secular.org, sarah@secular.org, you could do that. We could also change the settings at the end so that you're not muted. So if you have a question, there is a way to ask it. So use the chat box, send an email. We'll unmute you at the end to make sure your questions are answered. And with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Great, and you can see my screen, Sarah? Just want to make sure.
Actually, it is still loading. It says, please wait while the presenter loads his or her screen.
Huh.
So we might just need to wait one more moment, but just in case, in the meantime, I could upload the presentation. Sorry, folks, just give us a minute. Oh, something's working. Almost there.
Let me stop share. Let me just try this again. Reset it. You should see it now.
I see your screen. Yes.
Okay, here
Just
we
need to
go.
pull it up.
Switching over the presentation.
Great.
So, and you can see the presentation now?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for coming. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Kevin Bowling, and I'm with the Secular Student Alliance. So we're going to go on. This is a very visual presentation, so it acts as sort of a little outline and sort of taking us through the presentation today. So what we want to cover is a little bit about the mindset of the next generation. And so those are really looking at the millennials and sort of specifically, we'll get into a little bit of Generation Z. So the students that are really sort of beginning college right about now. And we'll talk about the changing world of the college campus, talking about working with the Secular Student Alliance, talking about gauging sort of the next generation in your communities and sort of the younger demographics, things that you can do, and then as Sarah mentioned, we'll be sort of answering specific questions that you have and try to personalize this as much as we can to you specifically. So we'll just sort of jump right in. So just a quick little bit with the Secular Student Alliance. We're the only national organization dedicated to working with atheist, humanist, and non-theist students. And so we really look at, we're working with the future leaders of the secular movement, and many of our students are involved in either as employees or volunteers with the secular movement and so a lot of the national organizations. But we also see our leaders are going to be sort of future leaders in our communities who are going to have secular values. And so we think that's really important in sort of moving forward. So we have 200, almost 300 chapters across the United States. Most of those are in college universities. We do have a handful in high schools, and we actually have our first middle school chapter starting up right now. So we think that's great. So currently about 1 in 4 of the US identifies as non-religious. And when we take that down to students, we're looking about 1 in 3. So a growing amount of the population is identifying as non-religious. And so for a lot of us working within the secular community, these are really the people who are going to be joining our groups. So it's sort of important to look at those people in specifically, but we really want to look at is the next generation and who are the sort of the new people coming up, the sort of young adults and students who are the future of movement and the future members of our organizations. So we're going to look at the class of 2020. And so those are the students who are starting really college now and moving through their 4 years, or what typically hopefully is 4 years for them of higher education. And so for the most of these students, they were actually born after the 2000, the turn of the century after 2000. So and starting to work with that. So Beloit College actually does sort of a mindset. So things that have happened as the students who are entering college, things that sort of have a major impact on their life. So I pulled some of those things that I think are interesting and help us learn a little bit, again, the mindset of this upcoming generation, about some of the influences, things that have impacted them. And so we have a better understanding of who they are. So as we go along, so the current mindset, so the class of 2020, their grandparents can sort of share their stories and memories about when Kennedy died, and their parents are sharing sort of where they were when 9/11 happened. Since these young people have been born, the U.S. has been at war the entire time. Donald Trump has always been a politician. He started as a Democrat, then an independent, and now a Republican. So, and he also had, of course, his little short stint as on reality TV. Vladimir Putin has always been running and leadership of Russia. So Bill Clinton has always been sort of the aging husband of Hillary Clinton for this generation. They have no idea who Newt Gingrich is. Enron was not around the entire time that they have been born. Chernobyl has never produced any energy since they have been here. So, and for them, when we look at sort of the BP Deep Horizon, that was one of many large environmental disasters that were far, far worse than Alaska at Valdez. Since they've been alive, cloning has been just a standard laboratory procedure. Vaccines have always been wrongly linked to autism. So the so-called abortion pill has always been available in the United States. And this is the first generation that has always had sort of the fear that they could be shot in their school. Since they've been born, Starbucks has always been selling cafe lattes in the Forbidden City in Beijing, China. I think many of us often think of Encyclopedia Britannica as the place to go for knowledge and information. They've always gone to Wikipedia. They have no idea who Donnie and Marie are, and some of you may be thinking that's a good thing. But they've always had Sex in the City and Survivor, and Dora and her monkey boots have always been exploring. Snowboarding has always been an Olympic sport. There's always been green ketchup. They will argue endlessly with their parents on what the first episode of Star Wars was. And they probably have never heard the little dial tone and you have mail from America Online. They also have lived in a floppy-free society. However, they've always had the nanny cam, and so parents being able to check in on the house at any time. They've always had that where you can use your thumb or fingerprint to identify yourself. eHarmony has always been matching couples for success, and they really don't care about email. So they have been using text as one of their primary forms of communication, and then sort of the platforms that have sort of existed beyond that. So when we're talking about the generations, so we had our baby boomers, and then sort of generation X, Y, and Z, and those are really the millennials. So we've been talking about sort of the millennials in general, but a lot of our conversation will really be sort of in Generation Y and specifically Generation Z, and those, again, the students that are in college right now. So as we're moving forward, so who are the millennials and why are they important? So we have about 80 million millennials in the United States right now, and they're the most ethnically and racially diverse population that we've seen in the United States. So they've grown up with technology, and clearly social media has been predominant in their lives. And in the coming years, they're going to be increasing percentage of the workforce. So by 2020, which is not far away at all by now, millennials will be 50% of the workforce, and by 2030, 75% of the workforce. And I think something that really just sort of defines this generation is they really want to make sure that what they're doing is making a difference, especially in their work. They're highly confident, have high expectations, and are really achievement oriented. And clearly this is a generalization, but I think it gives us a better idea of the millennials and sort of where they're coming from and really who they are. One thing about them is they're technoholics, especially the younger generation. So typically they're on or have 5 different screens that they're viewing. Technology is really integrated into their lives. And this is with Generation Z, this is really the first generation that understands that social media and technology is better when it's sort of temporary and private. And they've already sort of moved to platforms and skills where that is largely predominant. And so issues of privacy and those sorts of things are more of a concern for them. And so they look for sort of that temporary nature. But they're also real-time connection. So rather than sending an email and waiting for someone to, the next day to respond, they're online. So either texting where it's, real-time back and forth, or messaging, same thing, real-time back and forth, or they're on a video chat with someone real-time anywhere in the world. And so that's much more sort of the pace that they're used to and the expectations of communication that they are used to. This generation is real creators, so they're using technology and creators, and they're also super collaborative. And I think that has a lot to do with sort of this real-time connection and the access of the internet for them to be able to really access information and people anywhere in the world and simultaneously as our technology gets better and better. So technology is very important with this generation. I think it's important for us to understand that and how we communicate, how we interact, and how they find out about us. So some of the things, major sort of viewpoints that have had an impact in their lives, this is really the generation that's had to deal with climate change and environmental issues. This is the economic downturn in 2008 is clearly something that has affected the mindset of this generation. And the rising of the Arab Spring, and I think sort of the change in the world that happened from the Middle East and what was happening there has also had a major impact on their world and their mindset. The other thing is they're the first in the United States, the first generation to really, grow up with the fact that we have an African-American president, that also with same-sex marriage is just something that's legal and very natural. And the first generation that really had a fully viable candidate for female president. So in looking at this generation, I want to break it down a little bit further. I think we're very used to the rise of the nones and the non-religious, and that there's a large sort of definition of people that are included in that group. So breaking it sort of down a little bit more and getting into the nitty-gritty and more of the sort of young adults and people that we will be dealing with. So as we sort of mentioned before, we know that about 1 in 4 in the US are religiously unaffiliated and 1 in 3 of students. So of that, some of the studies show that as high as 19% sort of are your atheist, agnostic, free thinker, humanist, more secular identifying people. And I think this is interesting. A lot of people in this generation aren't going to identify with labels as much. So sort of that nuns or unaffiliated or non-religious may be a much more comfortable space for them. And sort of identifying more strongly as an atheist or agnostic secular may be a little less, they're unwilling to do. And so it's okay that we have people saying, yeah, I'm not religious. I want to be part of your group. And so I think, if we're more used to having that defined label, being comfortable with the fact that young people may not be identifying with those labels as strong is something for us to be aware of, and to be okay with, that they can identify however they choose. And this happens to be a group that we work with a lot in the Secular Student Alliance. So talking a little bit about politics, when you're talking about religion, why not throw in politics? So about 65% of atheists identify as liberal. And again, we come to sort of that point of labels. I'm not sure that's, a lot of youth are comfortable in sort of identifying with those labels. And when you look at sort of the things that are important to them, you'll see that, their values sort of skew what we consider to be much more liberal in our current society. So 74% say that the government should be helping people and helping the poor. Almost 90% say that abortion should be legal. Over 90% accept homosexuality and LGBT people. Almost 80% say we should have strong laws of protecting our government. And then 83% say the right and wrong depends on the situation. And we'll see a little bit of this theme as we move forward, where sort of those constructs of how things used to be, this younger generation is much more accepting of a little bit of more wiggle room in here. And I think when you also sort of look at hierarchies within our government, within political structures, within religious structures, they're going, yeah, we don't know if we need that all the time. So it's not just with religion, but we also see that with politics and just in structures in our society. And so it's important to see this, that 83%, it's, all based on the situation. So we start looking at voters and in education. We know that we can see that American voters are becoming more and more educated, where in 1977, so almost 20 years ago, it's about 55% of the population, and now it's almost 75% of registered voters have a college experience. And so again, with the Secular Student Alliance, we tend to work with lots of college students, and college students are becoming more politically active, and so this is, I think, important for us to realize as well. So about 20 years ago, about 1 in 10 of Democratic voters were religiously unaffiliated, and that's about 1 in 3 now. So clearly that demographic continues to be growing. And so in fact, the unaffiliated within the Democratic Party is now actually larger than white Protestants. So now moving a little bit to the campus, we're seeing a definite change in the campus community and sort of the world that students are involved in. So campuses can be home to many faith-based ministries who have their own student organizations on campuses. And we've seen even campuses where there's 120 different religious organizations and only one secular student alliance. So the prevalence of religious groups, we still continue to see that, and it's still only a small area where students who are identifying as non-religious have sort of a home and a place to go to. So of the 12 largest campus ministries, they started to recognize a trend, and they did their own research and recognized that within the first year of coming onto campus, that 70% of conservative Christian students were leaving their faith. And I think for me, there's a question of what leaving their faith means. And my guess is for them, one of the key indicators is they stopped going to church or stopped going to their service and those sorts of things. Sorry about that. I just lost my screen. I'll be back with you in a moment. So 70% of students are leaving their faith. And so they really knew that, so they started doing some research on why this is happening. And they sort of joined together in an effort to rejuvenate God's presence on college campuses. So they developed Campus Ministry Link. And so again, stemming this tide of students turning away from their Christian beliefs while making that transition to university life. And so in their research, they realized the first 72 hours were crucial. And this isn't the first 72 hours when classes start. This is the first 72 hours that students arrive on campus, so that they know that they need to do outreach to those students and connect them with one of the religious ministries on campus. And so they start out with an online tool that really connects students in high schools when they're seniors, figures out where they're going to college, and starts providing them information about what the campus ministries are on and around the school, and then identifying them when they arrive on campus and having people meet them and bring them to those facilities so that they start that aspect of community. And I think as the secular community, it's really important for us to realize a sense of community is really important, and people want to have a place where people are like them and they know that they have friends, and there's this instant bond that we have. And I think for a large part, those friendships and that sense of community are what we have in our local chapters, whether they're Free Thought or Humanist or FFRF, whatever those local groups are. That's what some of the things that we're benefiting from. And that's the same thing our students are looking for. So the religious community has clearly figured this out and is doing some very active things to sort of stem that tide. And again, they're looking to turn this tide and get people actively involved and back on their campuses. They even have guides for religious students to target non-religious students and how to share God's word and love with them. So this is something that we find that our students constantly have to deal with on college campuses. So probably one of the other things that you're familiar with is Project Blitz. And this is a group of conservative Christians that's a secretive legislative campaign to take back and put Christian theocracy back into the U.S. And it's not very secretive because they publish the entire thing online. But one of the things, that we've seen within a lot of schools is sort of the "In God We Trust" posters being required to be posted in schools. And so for some of the initial wave of Project Blitz really targets schools, specifically students, and sort of changing that perspective and really infusing religion at a very sort of substantial level in schools. And so again, something for us to be acknowledged about what students are facing and what they're having to do when they're in their college campuses and their school communities. So the religious community is highly organized, very actively proselytizing, and they're extremely well funded. So this sort of moves us on to our students. So again, I'll start talking about a little bit of the Secular Student Alliance, talking more in general about sort of your circles of influence and good places to start, and then moving sort of into sort of a wider range. So I think oftentimes when you think of the secular community and you think of those, the organizations, there's a definite picture about who's in local groups and those sorts of things. So for us, our college students, and what we see in our membership and in our leadership is they're about 50-50 male-female, which is not typical of, I think, of many local secular groups. For us, the demographics of the students, so about 25% of our leaders and our members identify as people of color, which is, I think, in line with a lot of what we see in the general population, and not as much of what we see in the secular community. And they also, for to about 20% of our student leaders and our student members identify as lesbian, gay, and bisexual, and another 5% are identifying as trans and gender nonconforming. So it's good for us to understand sort of the population as they're coming up into our local groups and our national organizations, so we have a better picture of who they are and sort of what their needs are going to be. So for our students, I did want to share some of the things that they're involved in and some of their interests. So clearly, separation of church and state is very important to our students. It's one of the bedrocks and one of the things that joins them all together. And I think a very common and similar bond with many of the national organizations and the local groups. There are also, environment and protecting the environment and climate change, large issues for them that they're actively involved in. Racial justice is something our students involved in, as well as LGBT civil rights. They also, when we talk about women's equality, our students are right there, sort of on the forefront, and making sure that our campuses, especially, are places free from sexual harassment. So our students also, when we talk about issues of immigration, are actively involved and also highly supporting the Dreamers. Issues of gun control, you can imagine, are important to our students. And again, our students are very sort of change-oriented, so wanting sort of policy and change and getting more and more involved in politics. So, and in that, we are a member of the organizations that are working on a Secular America Votes, and we have students around the country now doing voter registration. So this has been something that's ongoing, and that we're continuing to work more and more with our students with. But getting registered and being active and involved in the political process is very important to them, as well as doing community service. Our students are actively involved in their campuses and their communities in doing community service. And so again, a lot of these things are very active and being involved in changing their communities and sort of living out their values. And so we find that's what really drives our students. So knowing a little bit about them, what we always ask local groups, are you ready? So you've got a little more mind frame of, what sort of they went through, what their mind frame is, sort of, a little bit more about our students, what's happening on college campuses, and then, sort of what their interests are. And so let's really sort of dig in and talk about things that you can do and sort of outreach and to more young people for your local groups. And really what we want to talk about is how you connect to young people, how you reach out to them, and sort of making those connections. And I think oftentimes, in thinking, if you're a student and you're going to a local group, it's sort of, what's your first impression? What do you think that, they encounter? What do they think of? And I've sort of done this presentation for a number of local groups. And, for a lot of people, this is what students will encounter when they come in. It tends to be a little bit older demographic, and that they're probably used to it in their circles. And people always laugh and go, "Yep, that looks a lot like our group." And they go, "But we're friendly." And I said, "Don't worry, I got you covered." So I think one of the things that the local groups, very friendly and outgoing people, and that's what we really want to see, sort of being a welcoming force for the younger people coming in. For a lot of what we deal with in the younger generation is they really think at this time in their lives that this is the busiest that they're ever going to be. And so I think that's important for us to recognize. One, a lot of our, for students, they're full-time students, so they have full-time class loads, and then they have their homework and projects and papers and all those things that they're doing on top of that. For a lot of our students, they are also working part-time jobs to help then also to pay for their college education or pay for the living expenses. And then other people also have familial obligations that they're doing as well. So for them, this is a very busy time. And so for local groups sort of reaching out and going, hey, also join us, there may be some pause there. And for them, they really have to figure out what's the benefit in this? How easy is this going to be? How much enjoyment and satisfaction am I going to get out of this? And so those are important things for us to consider as we move forward. So a little bit about the millennials. So they're sort of the first generation really to grow up, so teaching themselves things. And that has to do a lot with technology and how they're moving forward. So they're not sort of stuck in those rigid environments about an organization. So, we've been doing the same things for 50 years now. That's not as important to them. And so when your sort of group, and this is what we do, this is what we've always done, and this is what we're going to continue to do, the message that sends to some of the millennials is, okay, I don't fit in here. And again, it's not that we have to change everything we're doing, but it is important that we recognize are we what are we doing to help accommodate new people? And so that's going to be different for each organization and just things for us to consider sort of as we move forward. And so as I think oftentimes millennials can, and especially the younger generation, go like, oh, they feel so entitled. But for them, it's really just like, hey, I wonder if this could be done a better way. Are there different ways to do this? And so oftentimes that can come off as a little bit entitled and a little bit, off-putting. But for them, it's just really like, what's another way to do this? And so it's important when we have our organizations that we're allowing that process to happen, because they're going to ask those questions. So if we understand that some of the questions they're going to be asking, we understand where it comes from, we can be a little bit more open to those situations. And so that's just important for us to recognize it and realize it's not really questioning what they're doing. It's just one of their processes. And if we can be open to new ideas, we're more likely to have some younger people joining our organizations. So I do really want to talk to you sort of about what the circles of influence are, who are sort of what's probably some of the easiest groups and avenues for us to outreach. And so we'll sort of start easy and sort of build out from there on what are some practical ways and practical audiences that we can reach out to as potential new members for our organizations. And so for me, it's really looking at one, I think we sort of have a honed in audience with the Secular Student Alliance, but then sort of also looking at who our personal sort of network is. So our friends and our family and our neighbors and people within our community. And then more sort of broadly looking at sort of general youth outreach and what some effective ways to do that and how do we reach out to them. So I will start with the Secular Student Alliance. We really do look at sort of a bridge with it's sort of into the younger generation and the new upcoming generation of the secular movement. We sort of share that with Camp Quest, who we have a sort of a good and dynamic relationship. So a lot of the students who are involved at Camp Quest become members of Secular Student Alliance, who then go back and volunteer as sort of camp counselors and those sorts of things for camp. So we have a great relationship with Camp Quest, and we recognize that we have a beneficial relationship with each other. We also understand with the Secular Student Alliance that we're a pipeline into the larger, broader movement. And so we want to make sure that our students who we've been working with and have program skills and leadership skills and working on all these things with them, how to communicate and how to work with other people and how to program plan, how to lead meetings, how to plan events, we want to make sure that energy and that expertise goes into the secular community. So it's very important for us that we're sort of that pipeline. And we've seen sort of a trend in the past that people are involved with the Secular Student Organization sort of drop out, and then like 30 years later they sort of pop back into sort of one of the local or national groups. And we want to help bridge that so that they're sort of knowing what they're able to be involved in, and it's sort of making more of a natural transition, and we're not seeing that long dropout period. So we're doing our part. We're working with the national organizations. And so hopefully for the locals, that process becomes easier and easier, because as all the nationals are sort of becoming better at giving the young people information, they're going to sort of know where you are and know how to reach you. So hopefully us working together makes that easier for you. But really what we're talking about is relationships. When we come down to it, it's the people within your groups, it's your local groups, it's all about the relationships that you have with the other individuals, and you have the relationship you have as a group yourselves. Same thing applies to the national organizations, just on a different level. And so when we're talking about new people coming in, it's about how we're forming relationships with them. And so we want to sort of set you off on what we think is sort of the best path, hopefully, in moving forward and being able to do that. And oftentimes I think when we have new people joining us or we're doing outreach, it's oftentimes who's the best person that should be doing that. Having myself a good bit of experience with the LGBT community, and oftentimes when we're talking about new people coming into those groups, there was sort of the people on the beginning edge, if you will, and really sort of making those inroads of sort of the movement, were the people who really had to sort of fight, and it was constant pressure and moving forward. And so they have this sort of like, hey, this is a challenge, this is a fight mentality. And you see a little bit of that in the secular community, the people who really sort of made the inroads and really had to push the boundaries and make it, make it so it was acceptable to call yourself an atheist. And the first one who had to do that in the community, there's still that sense of, we've got to fight them. The upcoming generation doesn't have that sense. And a lot of that's because of the work that so many people have done before them. And I'm glad that they don't have that sense, but it's important for us to recognize that. So the person who still has that raw, that fight mentality is probably not the best person to be reaching out to people who don't understand where that came from. Hopefully, as we go along, they learn that history and they understand that purpose and they appreciate what happened in the past, but that's not where they are. So who's the best person to be doing that outreach? And so it's important for every group to sort of think about that. Who's the sort of friendly one? Who's the outgoing one? Who's the one that has that best relationship? So think about that for your groups and how you're going to move forward, because it's all about the relationship. And oftentimes with our student leaders, and we talk about, it's that first impression that always makes the difference. And so putting that time in to think about that is crucial in moving forward. For us, we began in Ohio. We've sort of expanded across the United States. And so, as I said, we almost have 300 chapters now across the United States. We're also in Puerto Rico. We have some international affiliates. So for local groups, we have lots of options for you. We have ways to contact the student groups on our website, secularstudents.org. And we also have our staff is happy to help make those introductions. Call our staff. We can tell you a little bit about the chapters, what they're doing, what's important to them. So again, we're here to help you have sort of that good initial first step as well. So when we think of outreaching to the chapters and SSA students, so oftentimes we have people go, oh, we go to their meetings. We bought them pizza once. Nothing ever happened. And again, this is about a relationship. So when you're reaching out, ask them how you can help them. So at first they may not know, but all of our groups are a little different. They all have sort of different expectations. Their leadership is all a little different. Where they are in the United States and sort of what issues they're dealing with are all a little different. So asking them what you can do is sort of the best way to move forward. So for a lot of times it's, ask if you can go to one of their meetings or one of their events. And so you get to see what they're doing. You get to see what's important to them. You get to see how they interact. And this is a chance for them to see you, and you're, a new person coming in, and you sort of, again, it's building a relationship. When you go, listen. So allow the students to be in charge. Sometimes we have people who want to come in and go, oh, we'll help them plan that. We'll do that for them. It's really important that they have that ownership and that they're taking the lead and moving things forward. So if, it's perfectly great to offer a suggestion or two when you're asked, giving them some pointers and what things can do better. And again, that's sort of them testing out, and can I trust this person? How is this person going to be moving forward? So, and again, be positive and build that trust with them. And again, this is it's not a one-time thing. And again, we always have oh, we bought them pizza once, or we went to one of their meetings. And that's a start. But that's not how we move forward and we build a relationship with them. The other thing that we hear all the time is, oh, we invite them to our meeting and they don't come. And again, they don't know you. They don't know the local group. They don't know what to expect. If they don't have a few people to go, they're probably not going to come by themselves. So again, you going and doing that initial outreach, you starting to build that relationship is what we really have found to be most effective, not only with our groups, but with other groups as well. So if there's some adjacent groups, the Young Democrats, the Young Thinkers, other groups that you can get involved in that are in your areas that there's probably a high ability that there's a large sort of non-religious population in, Planned Parenthood, environmental issues, things dealing with math and science, evolution. Those are areas that, there's going to be a higher than normal percentage where you're going to find some non-religious students. And again, these same sort of things apply. Go there, find out what you can do to help, listen, let them get to know you, and then you can start inviting them to things that your organization is doing. And really what we, sort of taking this, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think you can, if I'm thinking of either ending the sharing of the screen so folks don't think that their computers are stuck, because we did get a question about that. Or do you think you could refresh it? Because I just don't want people to think that they're frozen out.
I can go ahead and refresh it, yes. Let me get back to
Thank
the,
you. Please continue.
sure. No, it's good. I'm glad. Thank you for letting me know. Group meeting. So full screen, you should be able to see the new screen again. And I'll go ahead and just pick up where we left off.
Great, I can see that.
Is that good? So I think part of
That's
that was
great. Thank you.
mentoring and sort of perfect, taking this relationship sort of the next level. And that's in large part, when you get into a stronger relationship, it's helping the students plan their meetings. So it's not doing the planning, but letting them do it and sort of ask questions and those sorts of things. It's also helping them plan their events, attending their events and bringing other people, showing them that you support them and that you're bringing other people in and you're sort of growing this community. And again, that's the sort of reciprocal behavior that I think you'll find, that they're appreciative, and then they'll start coming to your events and those sorts of things. When you get to know them a little better, it's sending a text of encouragement, taking them out to coffee, sending them to events. And then it's sort of really, as it gets to expand, it's sort of having sort of, career advice and internships and those sorts of things. And that's really when we get to the really strong sense of what it means to be a mentor and sort of be involved in the student's life. So there's no magic wand. Every relationship is going to be different. It's going to be finding out what works for you. And that doesn't go for our student groups. That goes for any youth group that you go into and start working with. So sort of what can local organizations do? And again, this is anytime you start inviting anyone in to your meetings, is making sure that your meetings are fun and active. And the same thing with events. I think when you're in a group and the group dynamics, who those people are. If it's sort of everyone's sitting down and you're just doing one sort of thing like it's a meeting, you sort of don't have that feeling of I get to know people and I'm getting to interact with people. And if you see some of the things our students are interested in, they want to be active, they want to be doing things, they want to be making a difference. So when you've got people coming, make sure you've got some active and fun things planned as you go along. Volunteering is a great thing. So one, you're making that difference, but it's also active. If you're working at a food bank or you're doing a river cleanup or you're, whatever it is, you're involved. And so you can have a conversation about what you're doing and about your group and learning about the other person. It's just much more natural. And it's a great way to sort of build that relationship. Invite people to have an active role. One of our students who, in the Sacramento area, for their Free Thought Day at the state capitol in California, plans the entire stage. She runs it. So our students have the skills and those sorts of things. So invite them to have an active role. And if they come with ideas, hey, what about your website? What about this? Get them involved. That's use that as an opportunity to get them involved and to show them things that they can do. And again, they're part of it already and part of the community. They're putting what they know about, and it's a need that you may have. And then for our students, we have lots of local chapters who look into sponsoring a scholarship. We work with several of the groups in Florida and Arizona in doing this. And they also sponsor students to attend conferences. And again, that's just a part of having a relationship with the students, and they know who you are, and you're also making an investment in them, and they have a greater appreciation for the local groups and what they're doing. Really what this is all about, it's, we want people to join our local organizations. We want people to join our national organizations. We want our organizations and our local groups to grow. So in looking about that, I think one of the things we can do is learn a little bit from the religious groups. And there's a lot of things that religion and religious groups do really well. This is a survey that they sort of put out about teens and why, sort of their thoughts on involvement in the church. And we can use some of this to our benefit. So we start to look at, where they're doing well and where they're not. People are, one of the things they like is that church is tolerant of people with different beliefs. And so that shows us we should be reflecting some of those same sort of things for people coming into our groups. So church seems to reject science, and what science tells us about the world. Well, there's a perfect place for us to emphasize that. So the church is hypocritical. Well, again, the church is not a safe place to express doubts. The church seems a little shallow. Those are places where it should be very easy for our groups to be on the positive side of working with youth, and being able to work with them and show them the benefits and get them involved in our groups. So let's, with a little bit more personal and looking at your networks. And I think it's important for group members to sort of do an assessment, take some ownership and some stock in going, what are my networks and how can I reach out? Who are people like me that would want to be involved in this? And so a lot of time that's looking at your family and your friends and your neighbors and who you're doing things with already. Chances are, and there's probably a growing number of non-religious people who are involved in those circles. And so it's sort of asking the questions, hey, I'm involved in this. Hey, we're doing this community service project this weekend. Do you want to come? Having those initial conversations are a great way to start that. So, are you planning your events where young people would be interested in? Hopefully, I've given you a lot of examples of what some of those things are. Again, being active, making a difference in community, showing that I'm having an impact. Super important things. And then, what are your sort of events that have options for youth or younger people? We don't want you have things that you're already doing and that your group has as traditions, not to ask you to give those up, but are things that, what are some things that you can incorporate youth in? I was actually having a conversation today with a woman who was talking about us and wanting to get younger people in her group, and she said, we had a woman who came the first time to our group, and she was 40 years old, and she asked if there were any other people who were around her age, and the woman said, nope, that person will probably never come back. So it's just that one word alone, and we often tell our student groups, it's those sorts of things. You have the one interaction. What are you doing? To get people in, make sure that you have an environment where you're encouraging them and you're welcoming them to do. So we'll get into a little bit more sort of specifics and examples. So what are some things you can do? Again, welcoming and inclusive talk. And I'll get into more, so the inclusive talk, I have a slide on that, so I'll get a little bit more into detail about that. But again, do you have someone at all your events and your meetings who's welcoming people in? If people are used to sitting in the same place all the time, do you mix that up? How are you, what sort of things are you doing that encourage new people so they don't feel like they're coming into a clique? Do you have people who are going, nope, your job this time is to go make sure that you talk to all the new people and introduce them to everyone else? Those are intentional things that we need to do to make sure that we're being welcoming to new people coming into our groups. Again, if they don't have sort of that good time coming in, they probably won't come back. And we oftentimes, it's great to have intergenerational spaces and separate spaces for different generations. So there are times we want everyone sort of mixed together. We want to form this sort of familial group and this sort of intergenerational community that we have. Sometimes when groups are talking, if you have the group and they're talking about business, and that there are younger people there, making sure you have family members who are bringing their kids. And as you get younger people in, they may have kids that are important to come with them. Having a room with the TV going and them being able to play Xbox, or having a movie going on, or having some outside activity where they're learning about a science project that you created. Those are sorts of things where parents can be entertained and you have someone to take care of kids. So again, we sort of want those intergenerational spaces. And then we also, sometimes it's important to have separate spaces where, all the different people are being entertained and are being engaged, and whether it's, depending on what their interests are going to be. So again, active projects, especially for youth, are always important. And it's really important to sort of take time and say, what are the benefits of your group? What makes you special? Those are things you should be able to translate and to be able to share with people, and to be able to sort of communicate very easily what makes our group special and what are the benefits of being involved in our group. So We really want, other things you can do is getting online. So clearly the way that technology is integrated in the lives of sort of the younger demographics, having an online presence, whether it's a website or social media, and we'll get much more into social media in a little bit, but is very important. Advanced planning and promotion. We often share with our student groups, the same thing applies for any group, is, when you have, is making sure that people feel comfortable, feeling like you're organized, you got your stuff together, because people want to be involved with something that's solid and they feel good about, not something that's wishy-washy. So making sure you've got that you're doing that advanced planning, that you've got promotion out there in a long time so that people can plan for what they're coming to, and those are things. When you do that, make sure that your events and your meetings are accessible. So there's some information about transportation. If there's public transportation that's available, make sure you have that. Share that there's parking or what the parking options are. If you have the ability to do childcare or having options for people with families, then just letting people know what that is extremely important. And sort of having that energetic leadership. So encouraging people to participate, listening to new ideas. And again, sort of the generation, Z, will probably seem a little bit challenging. It's not their intent, but it may seem that way. Just be open to it. And when they suggest something, go, great, let's figure out how you can do that. Let's put your skills into helping this group be better. Great way to get them involved. So I mentioned sort of welcoming, inclusive talk. So just want to touch on that a little bit more. So rather than just asking someone how old they are, go, hey, what'd you think about the event today? Rather than saying, are you new here? Hey, I don't think we've met. Here, introduce yourself. Do you have kids? Oftentimes we're getting maybe someone's not comfortable. We're putting some expectations on people. So a great thing to do is, what brought you here today? You're learning more about the person. You're learning what's interesting to them. Then you can share with them like, hey, this is what our group has to offer. This is what's special about us. You're learning more about them. So rather, are you in school? Tell me more about yourself. They get to share. They get to decide what they're sharing with you, and they're going to share things that are probably important to them, so you have a better idea about why they're here and what they're interested in. We need more young people. I've heard people say that. Oh my gosh, we need more young people. And this is just a great time. Hey, glad to meet you. So have you met our other young person? Again, this is a great time to say, hey, can I introduce you to my friend? And again, we're all part of a community here. So just some ideas to think about when we're talking about just sort of inclusive talk. And there's lots of examples that you can probably think of for your own groups, and probably things you've seen other people do. And there's ways that we can sort of welcome people. Really, since we're talking about a sort of very technology savvy group and talking about social media and some things that easy things that you can do to sort of move forward with your groups. I think one of the things we always see, especially for local groups, is Meetup. Clearly a favor for a lot of our local secular organizations. And this is not a favorite of what you're going to see for a lot of the younger demographic. And so am I saying get rid of your Meetup group? No, not at all. I think that definitely serves a purpose, and people know where to go and find those sorts of things. But let's say add on to that for sort of the upcoming generation and newer generation, younger people, about what you can do to meet with them. So, we would always recommend platforms that show what your group is doing and that it's active. And so Meetup is a little static, just gives a little bit of information. And it's really what we also look for is interaction. So ways for people to interact with you and for others in the group. And so for us, if we had to pick some, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're only going to do one of these, let it be Facebook. Start a Facebook group where people can find you and those sorts of things. I'm going to break these down a little bit and get into a little bit of detail on those and some of the things. And I'm going to focus primarily on Facebook, because if I'm going to recommend that one as, if you only have to do one, then let this one be the one that's going to be. So again, Facebook allows you to show what your group is doing, and that stress on interaction. So it allows people to interact with the group members themselves, post things, have discussions. You can share events, do polls, and again, being interactive. So some of the things that we use as sort of rule, some guidelines, is we always look at the 70-30 rule. And so this is when you're doing your posting from your organization. So about 70% of the post should be about things that your group would be interested in, and current events and those sorts of things. And 30% are, here's our next meeting, here's the potluck we're doing, here's an activity we're doing. So it really is about building community and sharing current events and talking about encouraging the interaction. And it's 30% of, here's the meeting, here's what we're doing, here's business, business, business. So things that you can share, pick national organizations that are doing things similar to you and share what they're sharing, because they're typically, have people who are dedicated, so it's an easy place for you to get information. Current events that you think are socially relevant, and if you're trying to attract more youth people, look on some, youth-oriented sites. What are they doing? What is, Planned Parenthood, the college campuses and Planned Parenthood, what are they doing? What are the Young Democrats doing? What are the Young Republicans doing? What are other groups doing that you can sort of pull from? Share some of those sorts of things, because clearly they have people who are trained and doing research on what that interaction is, and you can just, steal that sort of stuff and make it a little bit easier to you. But again, action-oriented, action-related. You want it to be sort of active and vibrant. People are attracted to that, especially younger people. And I do want to talk a little bit about targeted promoted posts. And I don't think this is something that's a lot of the organizations take advantage of. And it's something that's, I think, the national organizations do. I know we are doing a lot more of this. And this is just a quick example of what it sort of looks on the backside when you're doing a promoted post. And this is where you're paying a little bit of money as a group, and you're sort of, defining an audience, figuring out how many days, how much money you want to spend, and sort of what your priorities are. And so we did a post sort of about a trans student and what was happening on their campus. And we know we're trying to expand our audience and who's participating in us. We know that the LGBT community is somewhere between 50 and 80% non-religious, or don't participate in religion or organized religion. So this is something that we clearly did. It was something that's within our values, and we said, hey, we want to amplify this. So we sort of promoted this, and you can see we spent at the bottom, we spent $10 on this. From that, we reached about 3,000 people within 2 days. You can see, we did the entire United States. We did a population of 16 to 65. And sort of looking at who we were promoted to. And it's sort of, as you get data from it, it breaks it down. What actions were people taking, so you know that, and even break it down to who is responding. And so you can see, oftentimes I think you hear, oh, Facebook is dead to the younger population. I really want you to look at that sort of younger, it breaks it down by age groups. So keep looking at our posts and the younger demographics. And clearly on our site, we skew more probably to a younger demographic than a lot of the national organizations. But we broadcast this out. We sent this to people age 16 to 65, and you can see what's coming back as far as, who's interested in this sort of thing. So the other thing you can see is this also had 223 shares. That's people sharing this post in other places. The interesting thing is the total sort of people reached was almost 40,000 people. And again, a lot of that was organic and people sharing it, but we only spent $10, and we get a lot of bang for our buck in sort of doing that. When we have new chapters, we do a post, and so this was a new chapter at Nazareth College in New York, and so we promoted this in New York and to people who are to students. And again, we pick the demographics and those sorts of things. But clearly see, we're reaching a young demographic. The new one is something that we did to promote our scholarships. And, again, we didn't spend a lot of money, and we're reaching a lot of people. And so, again, we constantly look at post engagement. That's one of the big things for us. How many people are interacting with what we're doing? And that's what we want to see. And you can also see these are fairly visual. Like, it's very picture oriented on the ad itself, very little text. So it's really, we know that pictures are a lot of things that get people motivated and get people activated. So in talking about selecting your groups and those sorts of things, we develop our own groups about what our needs are. And so we have custom audiences, and we have, states that we're looking to have more interaction, the secular community, high schools. We've been, with our scholarship program, we were doing some specific information on high schools in Florida, so we were targeting there. So, and then some, LGBT community and other things. So we have a number of groups. We've even taken our student leaders and put all of their email addresses, given that to Facebook. Facebook already knows it. They already have it. It's not like we're sharing any secrets. And we said, create an audience like this for us. And so they said, yep, we can do that. And we said, just give us the smallest group you can pick is 1 million. So 1 million people in the internet who are most like our student leaders. And so we do active promotion into helping us identify who's probably going to be interested in our group and those sorts of things. So just a quick example of us going into finding a group. So here we're picking students in the United States, age 17 to 25. We put some things that they're interested in. We can define what those are, and that helps us focus in. So you get really focused. And rather than the United States, we can say, hey, give me Duluth. Give me Austin, Texas. And, you can really sort of narrow those sorts of things down. So a great way for you to get super specific and to really not spend a little money. One of the things with talking about sort of our custom audiences, and again, we sort of have our student lead, people who look like our student leaders in there. And we sort of will extend the invitation. If you've got an event, well planned that's really geared towards youth, and you come up with, hey, we want to spend $10 on this. We want to spend $20 on this. We want to spend $100 on this. We'll work with you. And clearly we can't give you that custom audience, but we can go in and work with you on creating an ad on our Facebook page that directs them to your event or to your site or to your website or to your information page, your meeting page. We will definitely work with you on that. So we have a good bit of data already there. And if you've got something that's ready to go, you're ready to sort of target that to a youth audience, we'll work with you on, if you want to sort of boost that, we'll help you do that. And so we can use our data to sort of help your local organization and meeting that goal. So you can feel free to, as you've got those sort of things, you can always reach out to us and we'll be happy to work with you on doing that. And hopefully it drives more people to your events, more people to your group, and those sorts of things. The other thing is sort of Facebook also owns Instagram. And so you can see, when we do our advertising, we also do cross-platform advertising. So here we're sort of targeting age people 17 to 26. We have some specific states we were looking to sort of grow our sort of new chapters and those sorts of things. So we did define 25, so we said spend $30 over 66 days. We had 22 people click through. And again, you can see 18 to 24 is the best range of people doing that. And you can also see that this is what they saw on their Instagram feed. So even though we're buying this in Facebook, Facebook is showing this in Instagram. It's all linked. It's all coordinated. It's super easy for us to do. This same ad is also showing on mobile phones, on Facebook, showing on desktops. So it's across platforms. Facebook makes this really easy. So Instagram is sort of where young people are right now. There are other platforms out there that I'm not going to go into. If you just want to do one, Instagram is the one to be in to help reach younger demographic. And it's based on photos and images. And so having a theme, showing happy people in photos, doing something is really important. And again, you can advertise directly through Instagram, or you go right through Facebook and do it. And if you're going to do it, I highly recommend just going right through Facebook to do those sorts of posts and those sorts of things. The demographics and the recording is super easy. So again, I think most people in the second community are familiar with Twitter. So we're actively involved on Twitter and growing our population on there. So for easy things for local groups to do, having your own content is clearly important. Retweeting things from the national organizations and other organizations that are in groups that you're interested in, you think are potential interest in joining your groups, perfect way to do those. Clearly Twitter, current events, political action. The average tweet lasts about 5 minutes. So, tweeting repeatedly on Twitter, you almost can't do it too much. But it's a great way for you also to connect with similar groups, find them, you follow what they're doing, be able to retweet that information. Um, for me, I think Twitter is more your political and current activities. We've never found a really good conversion rate of this is the great place where you get new members. This is the great place where you have a lot of interaction. But if you want to have that presence and you're more politically activated, and that's sort of the, politics, lobbying, those sorts of, political action, being on Twitter is a good place to be, and you're going to find a lot of things that you're be able to retweet and to have a lot of positive impact in. So yes, so we sort of have covered a lot of information, but important things for your group. How is your group going to outreach to new people? Sit down, think about that. Who's going to be doing it, and I think that is crucial. And then again, sort of, what are you going to do to make the new people feel welcomed, feel like your organization's got its stuff together, is solid. That's what people want to be involved in. And so hopefully I've given you some examples and some avenues you can take to sort of answer these questions. And clearly for each organization, it's going to be a little different about what they do, who they're partnering with, and what the expertise is within their group, and what sort of avenues they think they can move forward in. So at this point, really like to sort of open it up to questions that you may have. If you think of something later as we're going along, you can always email. I'm the one who gets all the SSA at secularstudents.org. Please feel free to email me with questions that you have, or those are things. Always happy to do that and help sort of local groups. You clearly are feeders for us. We hope that your family members, they have kids, and that those kids are, while they're in school, they're joining an SSA chapter, or if there's not one at their campus, they're starting an SSA chapter. So we always want to do everything that we can to help other national and the local groups. So I'm happy to take some questions and answer things that you have, so we can make this as personalized to you as possible.
So Kevin, we have this question. I'm just going to read. It's from Michael. He said, please speak to what attracts students to religious organizations. I include in the religious category those who take a position by identifying as secular versus those who truly do not care. To what extent is it related to strong family traditions, even if the students reject the specific beliefs, or are they simply seekers? So I guess the overarching question is, what's attracting students to religious organizations? And I guess maybe if we could relate that back to what we can be doing to be attractive to students.
Definitely.
Young people.
And I think I think clearly one of the important things to recognize as as we're starting this question is less and less students are young people are being attracted to religious communities. But I do think I definitely think there is the sort of family expectations and the indoctrination that takes place in religion. And you have to, whatever your beliefs are about religion in general, the structure that religion has set up and the ability to build community and for you to have a group of almost instant friendship, they have really done a fantastic job at that. So, if you want to, and I think your point is well taken, if you want to look at what religion is doing, look at that, look what they're doing well, and sort of ignore the parts that you don't like about it. But yes, I think one is, almost every religious events you go to, and growing up Catholic, I've been to a number. They have their greeters. There are people at the door welcoming you when you come in. And, most religious services start with, hey, go ahead and say hello to your neighbors. You shake hands, you do that sort of thing. And going up in the Catholic Church, you had the kiss of peace, where again, you're embracing, you're talking to, you're showing a bond with other people. I think we far too much discount that. And so we often hear that, the secular community is like herding cats, they're not joiners. Well, look at all the people that are part of your organizations, that are part of our organizations. We have a lot of joiners. We need to stop saying that, because they are. We need to provide the sort of environment where they're coming to those things. And I think religion does a really good job of saying, this is what, please come be a part of this. This is why you should. and this is what we're doing. And I think as secular organizations, we need to be better at sharing that same sort of information, creating those welcoming environments. And I think one of the things that religious communities do well is oftentimes they're always talking about it. They're always inviting you, whether you are part of that religion or not, they're inviting you to come join. So our SSA group at University of Southern California here, and Bart Campolo, if you know Bart, working with them, he's done a fantastic job, and it's about building community and watching out for each other and those sorts of things. And they go on campus when they're there, they see someone sitting alone. They have no idea whether this person is non-religious or not, although about 45% of their campus is, so almost half their campus is. But they go and invite them to come to the meeting, and they invite them to come and sit with them, and they invite them to have lunch with them. It's bringing them to the friendship. That's in essence what people are looking for. And so they're also doing lots of community service. And I think I talked a lot about that, but being active, making a difference in community and sharing that sort of thing. And you may have things that all your members can't do. So not every member of an organization is going to be, there's physical abilities and those sorts of things. They're not going to be able to go to a river cleanup. That's fine. But having a group, a small group of people go and being able to do that exercise who can, is a great way to start. While you're, cleaning up the river, you're having a great conversation. It's about building a relationship. And so those, I think, are things that religious groups do really well. When you put in all the indoctrination and those sorts of things, it's sort of reinforces itself. I was just at the Religious News Association conference, and PRI has some new research coming out that sort of shows how important that indoctrination is. And I think the interesting thing for our communities, secular communities, is once that wall of that circle of indoctrination stops, it's exponentially increasing how people are leaving religion. And one of the studies looked at sort of the familial bonds, and if you have someone who's religious in the family versus not religious in the family, the likelihood of being non-religious starts at 33% and quickly jumps to 66%. And that's a reoccurring theme. And again, that turns exponential. So a lot of that is that circle, but I think we're finding that's going to be quickly changing to our benefit in the U.S. society. Did I answer all of that?
So Kevin, I'm going to open up the lines. Michael, do let us know if that answered your question. I'm going to open up the lines so that folks who are on the phone can also ask questions.
Fantastic.
Thomas, go ahead. I cannot hear Thomas's question. Let me see. Let me try something else. Maybe now we can hear you, Thomas. Can you try again?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Go ahead. Yeah, now we can hear you. What's your question?
Okay. Okay. So I'm noticing a problem. So I like a lot of this advice. But I'm noticing a problem, at least with our organization, which is it's hard to define what we stand for. A secular organization, we sort of define ourselves as what we're not. And I find that that's a very difficult problem. It shifts from year to year depending on who's in charge of things, and it ends up being just something that's hard. It's hard to compete with. I know millennials are very interested in activism, and things, but it's hard for us to compete with organizations that have a clearer focus. Does that make sense? And is this something that others encounter, and how do you deal with that?
I think it is. It is a problem that some secular organizations have, and so. But I do think it's important for us to start defining that. And so I know for the Secular Student Alliance, for For SCA, we have values that we stand for. We have sort of like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. This is what we stand for. These are our values. And so I think it's important for the local groups to spend some time to sort of figure that out. And again, if you're a new person coming into a group, you want to know what the organization stands for. You want to know what they're doing. You want to know that you're getting into if you're going to be putting time and energy into a group, you want to know that it's solid and those sorts of things. So I think it's worth the group to spend some time. This is what we stand for. This is what our values are. This is what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I think we do that, but I think that from year to year it shifts a lot, and the specifics of it shift a lot. I think the general principles stay the same. I think toleration and maybe rationality, pro science, all those things stay very much the same. But the specifics of it, because people join for specific interactions. People don't join for the general things. I think may get you to pay attention, but then what keeps you there is specific relationships, specific people. When that changes a lot, and I almost wonder if it's an unsolvable. It seems almost to me to be an unsolvable thing, because just by the very nature of how we define ourselves in the negative. It's like, suppose you had a group, suppose you had an organization of non-hockey players. That would have a consistent, set of values, but how you implement that will just be different from, from time to time. And that's something I feel like I'm struggling with. Like, I came to this group, to our local group, because they put on some excellent talks.
Right.
And that pulled me in. Then we had a year where somebody wasn't, president wasn't very interested in hosting talks, so I kind of dropped out. And then now we have a president who's ramping that back up, and I'm trying to help with that. But it feels like it's not. It makes it hard to tell people what we do, because it's like, well, this year's version is this, but and so I don't. Anyway, sorry.
No, yeah, and I think
Yeah.
if there's not a consistency in your values and those things, it is going to be more difficult. And so, if it's having an organizational structure where it's not just the president deciding, and you've got some committees that can be involved, that's a great way to get more people involved and feel like some ownership in it. And if they're, I like events, so I'm going to go on the event committee, well, then I'm going to start doing events that I like, and then I'm really I'm doing things I'm interested in. Hopefully other people are. And then I also have ownership in the group, and I'm a part of this group. Those are important things to have happen.
So we do have those. We do have a board, and we have some sort of subgroups. I guess they all sort of flux, and maybe, I don't know, maybe we're just not in a big enough city to do this. We're in a city of it's Charleston, South Carolina. It's a city of maybe 500,000 actually, but compared to a city like Chicago with 10 times that, in the greater metropolitan area is I don't know if that's one problem we're having, and whether it's easier to do this in a larger city. I don't know.
And
we have some thoughts on that.
What we typically find with our student groups is, if it is in a smaller community, our groups are actually larger. And so if you look, you look like, tiny little Logan, Utah has 150 members in our student group.
Oh, so okay.
So I think in larger cities, I think it's larger cities, there tends to be more, I think, secular, non-religious people, and so you'd find a little bit less need for that. Where Charleston's a smaller community, it's in a really conservative area. I love Charleston.
Yeah.
So I think it's finding what your niche is.
Yeah.
Understanding what your values are, and then doing things that there's that consistency in getting people involved, and just constantly sort of pushing that and evaluating what works and what doesn't. Making sure that you continue the things that are working.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Thomas. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you all so much for participating today, and thank you, Kevin, for a fantastic presentation. Can you just repeat one more time the email address where folks can contact you?
Sure. If they want to do it at SSA, Secular Student Alliance, SSA, at secularstudents.org.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kevin, and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.